I have a confession to make. I went a little postal Wednesday evening. The whole Mike Huckabee call for a Chick-Fil-A Appreciation Day had not shown up on my radar. I've been a little busy. I didn't know what was going on until we were here for our movie that evening, and some folks told me about the lines in front of the Chick-fil-A, and then I remembered having heard about Mike Huckabee's call for this demonstration, which I thought, who pays attention to Mike Huckabee? So I had to get a ride home. Mike and Carolyn were taking me home from church, and I asked them to just go by the Chick-fil-A and let's see if it's still going on. And sure enough, 9 o'clock at night, people still needed some really bad fried chicken. And I was, of course, appalled, but then I saw a gubernatorial candidate's tour bus turning and getting in the line. And I unlocked the door and jumped out of the van and ran over to the bus and said, "So you're out here to get the hate vote, is that right? You want to murder all the gay people like the owners of Chick-fil-A. Those are the people that you want to govern. That's who you want to be as governor of the state." He was a little alarmed. You know, honestly, folks, if you didn't know it, the owners of Chick-fil-A have donated more than $5 million. They call this free speech, but they've given over $5 million to support efforts in Uganda to execute people for being gay and to support a movement in the United States. They're not going to get very far with this, but to support a movement to export, to expel, what do you call it? Deport people for being gay in the United States. Yeah, sorry, I lost the word. And that just doesn't seem like a free speech issue. This seems more like advocating genocide and ethnic cleansing. A point perhaps that might have been lost on the people in line who were just there because their pastor with an IQ of 70, 80 had told them to do it. But it wouldn't have been lost on a candidate for the state's governor's office. Of course, Dan Cathy, the Chick-fil-A's president, says that he's not anti-gay, not anti-gay. In his own words, he's just very much supportive of the family, the biblical definition of the family unit, which, of course, Charles, you're a New Testament scholar. You think of the definition of biblical family unit, including many wives, concubines, and slave girls, which he evidently wasn't thinking of. He was thinking more narrowly of Pauline or Deutero-Pauline letters in the New Testament. But still, if he were being honest, wouldn't we see him trying to repeal no-fault divorce laws, or wanting to make infidelity a criminal offense, or restricting the cohabitation of unmarried persons of opposite sex? He hasn't spent a cent on any of those measures, but has donated $5 million to support violent crimes against gay people. So as in most cases, when people say, "I'm not anti-gay, I'm just in favor of free speech," he's anti-gay. I remember Soren Kierkegaard saying of the people of his time in Copenhagen, they always want free speech, but they never ask for freedom of thought, which scares them. I was seething with anger, but you know, angry outbursts are not very helpful in such situations. So I went home and I dug out my white alb that I reserved for baptisms. I haven't worn it in public for anything but baptisms for 30 years, but I put it on and I went out and stood in front of Chick-fil-A until they closed, looking like a crazy monk. But you know, when you're wearing clerical garb in public, it forces you to be nice, so I was smiling and waving and handing out copies of a newspaper article detailing how the restaurant owners use their profits to further neo-Nazi agendas. But I did it in a nice way. Honestly, you'd have been proud of me. If you'd seen me, you would be happy. I know all too well that such actions don't really change anyone's minds, But you all have heard me tell the story before about that Civil War battle where the armies of the North and South were running towards each other on the battlefield, and an old woman came running out of her cabin carrying her broom over her head, and a soldier said, "Grandma, you need to get back to your house. You can't do anything out here with that." And she said, "At least I can show them whose side I'm on." So I felt like somebody needed to stand up for the gay community out in front of Chick-Fil-A, even if you just look like, oh, thanks. Was I begging for that? I just needed any gay person that was driving by to see that there was a religious voice that did not applaud the prejudice that was being expressed against them. I want to ask you, though, to take a look at the cover of your bulletin. Every week we print the 8 points from progressive Christianity. And number 3 says that by calling ourselves progressives, we mean that we are Christians who seek community that is inclusive of all people, including, but not limited to, conventional Christians. We don't have many of those, but conventional Christians and questioning skeptics, believers and agnostics, women and men, those of all sexual orientations and gender identities, and those of all classes and abilities. And the 4th point illustrates what we mean by creating that kind of community. It acknowledges that we know that the way that we behave towards one another is the fullest expression of what we believe. It doesn't matter to me if you believe that Jesus was born of a virgin, suffered for your sins, died on the cross, was raised on the 3rd day. If you're mean, you still suck. If you can't get to a point of affirming acceptance and forgiveness and affection, your religion really doesn't have much to it. On this day, when we're celebrating our 4th anniversary of the church's founding, I want us to think about our community. We were not named accidentally, after all. We named ourselves the Community Christian Church because it was our intent to create community among us. But creating community, especially in the environment of the 21st century, is very difficult. We divide ourselves. Now, I think I've heard historians say that they believe our nation is more divided now than at any time since the Civil War. We just jump to divide ourselves along political lines, gender lines, economic class, race or language or age. The famous psychiatrist M. Scott Peck wrote a book about building community entitled The Different Drum. And in it, Peck argues that one of the most crucial aspects of community is that it is ferociously inclusive. In fact, I heard Peck lecture on several occasions, and he would say, "You must be tolerant of everything except intolerance." Tolerant of everything but intolerance. That is, you must push yourself to be accepting, forgiving, inclusive, especially of the people you don't naturally like, especially of the people with whom you disagree, the people who are different from you, the people who may even offend your personal sensibilities. But the one thing that a community must reject is intolerance. In fact, the first time I heard Scott Peck say that in a lecture, I actually went back and looked at the conflicts in the Gospels. That every time Jesus has a conflict with someone within the gospel narrative, he is having it because they have rejected other people. Jesus was known to socialize with tax collectors and sinners, which is, in our parlance, traitors and prostitutes. He visited with them, he had dinner with them, he partied with them. You have to recognize he wasn't going into those homes to save those people. He went to those people's homes because he liked being with them. They were his friends. But the only time Jesus got into a shouting match with someone, the only time Jesus told someone to go to hell, he was talking to religious bigots who refused to accept the people who lived on the margins of society. He said to the Pharisees in Matthew 23, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you're nothing but hypocrites. You lock people out of the kingdom of heaven, but you don't even go in yourselves. And when others are going in, you stop them. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for you cross sea and land to make a single convert, and you make the new convert twice as much a child of hell as you are yourselves. That was the only group of people that Jesus got angry about. Folks, we get pressure from the larger world to simply be nice people. But passivity does not create community. Being neutral in ethical matters doesn't create community. That creates victims. It takes courage to create community. It takes a willingness to invest energy to understand one another. If you will expend the energy to fully understand another person, you will find yourself automatically being forgiving of them. Thomas à Kempis says in the Imitatio Christi that if you will fully understand another person, forgiveness is automatic. And if you can forgive, you can love. Now, megachurches are the big trend in religion these days, but megachurches are warehouses filled with thousands of people who never have to engage one another in conversation. House churches, which is the other end of the religious spectrum, are very small, but they allow people to self-select, to only be around carbon copies of themselves so that they never feel the discomfort of having to sit next to someone who maybe has a disability that makes them feel uncomfortable, or who voted differently from them in the last election, or has a sexual orientation that disturbs them a little bit. They self-select into tiny little self-congratulatory groups so that they never have to rub elbows with anyone that would make them think or make them grow. Real inclusivity, what it takes to build a real community, is dirty business. And it's hard, and it doesn't go in a straight line. You take 2 steps forward and you take a step back. In a real community, you have to live in close enough proximity to know the people around you, to know who's unemployed, to know who has cancer. You know who's divorced, you know who's straight, you know who's gay, you know who's bi. You break bread with people of different races and different political parties. You disagree about issues and beliefs, but you never let those disagreements make you reject that person. Saying that you hate the sin but love the sinner is just another way of hating the sinner. You understand? That is just religious doublespeak. If you cannot accept the person as they are, you are rejecting them. And you've got to get to the point that you actually understand the person well enough to be completely accepting and forgiving. And if you find that you can reject your friends, if you find that people are becoming disposable to you, the problem is not with them. We cannot say that it is just a matter of opinion that you want to execute or deport a significant number of people. As Karen Armstrong so clearly states, if your understanding of the divine makes you kinder, more empathetic, and impels you to express sympathy in concrete acts of loving kindness, that is a good theology. But if your notion of God makes you unkind, belligerent, cruel, or self-righteous, if it led you to kill in God's name, that's a bad theology. Isn't it obvious what a simple Occam's razor that is to understand the difference between healthy spirituality and unhealthy spirituality? We here have rejected the part of our religious heritage that masked cruel, unkind, or violent behavior by blaming it on God. We have forsaken the church that asked us to sit quietly and dream of going to heaven while all those around us suffered through a living hell. We are striving to give birth to a faith community that is a safe place, that is affirming, that is inclusive, that is healing, and is prophetic. In fact, 4 years into this journey together, as we sit here in this building surrounded by thousands of pairs of shoes, that will tomorrow, these shoes will begin their journey to Nicaragua. And as this week you all begin to make plans for how you're going to cook and serve the unsheltered homeless of Springfield, I want to say that you've done it. I want to say that you've made it. Most weeks you generously applaud my meager efforts at preaching, but today I want to turn the tables on you because it's you that deserve the applause. You're the people that were willing to swim against the current of religious irrelevance. You're the people who rejected religious-based prejudice. You're the ones that refused to kowtow to judgment and guilt. And you have sent a message of forgiveness, of acceptance, and of passionate love of justice all around the globe. So I appreciate you, and I applaud you, and I love you.
You've been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at reverend.ray@aol.com for more information.